There is an allure to playing Count Dracula in the board game Fury of Dracula. Who wouldn't want to carry on a bad Bela Lugosi impression over the course of an entire 2-hour game? But the hunters are going to be after you, so you're going to need to impress them with your deft maneuvering, or the hunters will make you eat your Transylvania trash talk. This strategy guide will give you the tips you need to survive. Welcome to Legendary Tactics. Playing Dracula in this game is a lot of fun, but a real challenge, especially if you are up against skilled hunters. You're going to need to keep your wits about you, and hopefully these strategies will give you a good start to learning how to play the vampire well. First of all, let's take a look at the board. You're going to need to take some time to get to know the board well. There are some choke points and some areas that can be tricky, where you could be cornered easily if you aren't careful. While it is best to stay flexible and move wherever the hunters think you aren't, there are certain parts of the board that are quite simply easier to get lost in. Central Europe, comprised of Gallia, France, Germania, Germany, Austro-Hungaria, and Baltica, also known as the Balkans, can certainly give you a fair number of options. They have the most plentiful routes and somewhat obviously will be a good place for Dracula to hide. But what of places like Italia, Italy, or Britannica, England? Aren't these too limited and narrow? Even Iberia, Spain can feel that way sometimes. Well, this is where the mind games of Fury of Dracula come in. Italy, for example, seems like such a dangerous place for Dracula to be, with more or less linear and limited pathways in the south, and areas close to where the hunters generally are in the north. But at the same time, you can use that to your advantage. The hunters may not think that you would be stupid enough to hang around in Italy because you could be so easily cornered there, and therefore they may not focus their search in that direction. England is similar in this way, but offers a potential hideaway that is off the beaten track. I love escaping to England when the hunters think I've gone south. It feels so safe. You're going to need to read the board, listen in on the conversations the hunters are having, and see if you can fake them out. Cards like Summon Storms, in combination with a Move by Sea, can be very helpful in making them think that you are going in one direction when you're really headed in another. Or, are you instead using those storms to block the hunters from following? You can use roadblocks in a similar way. The mind games are a key part of this board game, and you're going to have to work hard to be as unpredictable as possible. There are too many permutations and combinations of this sort of thing to cover in a video of this sort. You will just have to get some playing experience with the game to get a good idea on how to do this, and understand the personalities of the people hunting you, not just the character abilities of their tokens. So where on the map board should you begin? Generally, and pretty obviously, it's best to start as far away as possible from where the hunters generally are. The exception might be if one of the hunters is set up well away from the others, in which case you might want to go into attack mode. I'll cover that a little bit later. But the reason for the distance is because you want to build a trail that stands a chance of maturing, especially if you can play a vampire right away, and the more time you have for that, the better. If you are more daring, and especially if you don't have a vampire in your initial hand, you may start close to the hunters, likely with a small city in between, and follow behind their movement. The hunter is unlikely to move towards you because small cities limit their supply action. They have no reason to turn around and go there, and keeping a little distance prevents you being found by the evil presence or local rumors events. But watch the board carefully from a high-level strategic perspective, and make sure that you have a potential escape route or two if the hunters get wind of where you are. Just remember that Mina's special ability allows her to search an entire region if she is with another hunter in the same city, so don't be caught off guard. It is pretty standard for Mina and another hunter to be starting the game in a city like Vienna, and then moving through the Central European countries, searching all the way with Mina's radar. This helps the hunters to efficiently narrow down possibilities. You can try and predict where they will be searching next and move accordingly, like into the region that has just been searched, but you can never be 100% certain that you won't be pinpointed this way. Remember that the hunters are going to try to be unpredictable as well. So, you may consider Spain or Baltica as decent spots to start, all things being equal, but it does of course depend on where the hunters are and which encounter cards you start the game with. If you want to be really sneaky, you could start in Ireland or in Cagliari in the Mediterranean. This can potentially lead to an unusual card sequence that will really leave the hunters confused at the very beginning of the game. There's no question that Dracula is a powerful character that can hold his own in a fight, but getting into multiple scraps with hunters is not going to help you win. In fact, that is a losing path. You're going to want to avoid them as much as you can and fight only as necessary. That said, if a hunter happens to be on their own, it can make sense to play a more aggressive style, attacking the lone hunter yourself, sometimes multiple times if you can, in a bid to get influence. This can be easier in the early game as the hunters don't have many items yet to defend themselves, nor tickets to get to your area faster. It does mean that you give your location away, but this can be okay if the other hunters are far enough away and out of position. Besides, the influence you can get with multiple attacks in a short time can really put the hunters behind the 8-ball. But understand that this is generally a risky play. You can also attack later in the game if you are approached by a hunter with low health, and if you can use something like the Nocturnal Visit or Enraged event cards. Combat for you is always better at night anyway, as you have some cards with effects that are enhanced at night. But avoid combat with more than one hunter by any means necessary. You may be able to take on 1 or 2 hunters if you have reasonably high health levels, but your odds of survival are pretty low if you are up against 3 or 4. And do your best to keep track of what items each hunter holds. This is valuable information, and is why some of your encounter cards cause the hunters to simply show which items they hold. You need to know, for example, if Heavenly Host is held and by whom, as that card can be deadly for you. Dracula will likely be sucked into combat at least once during the game, and you need to know the combat cards well. I will take a quick look at them here. Speaking of the cards, you will want to be intimately familiar with your combat, encounter, and power cards. Plotting is a great defensive card that can be used effectively against a hunter with many items. Even though it can be easily blocked, it can help you with exactly the card you need at the right time and gives you the option to block an engaged hunter's punch, dodge, or escape actions, which is helpful in dictating the rhythm of combat to some extent. Mesmerize is also a defensive card that can help offset any weapons the hunters may try to use against you. Fangs is a high-risk, high-reward card that is used in combination with Mesmerize to bite one of the hunters and remove them from combat. This is especially fun when used as a counter to the Heavenly Host item. Claws is a card that can cause some good damage, but is most importantly used against the Garlic Wreath. Strength is a core card in your combat deck. It can not only do damage, but also cancel Punch, Crucifix, or a weapon card, and, if the battle happens at night, it can help relieve the hunter of that Crucifix or weapon. The other 2 card types, Escape as Bat and Escape as Mist, gets you out of battle provided your Pride ability allows you. Escape as Bat is especially effective at night, as it allows you to clear your current hideout and secretly choose a city up to 2 roads away that is not occupied by a hunter. Combat itself is always going to be a risk, especially if the hunter has items in hand. You're going to have to do your best to guess what the hunter might do and try to counter. You don't need to do damage every round. Sometimes taking a turn to put Plotting or Mesmerize in play early on can make a big difference. If you do end up in combat with multiple hunters, focus on the ones that have items. Hunters that don't have items can only hurt you with Punch, which only does 1 damage if it lands. If you're not sure what items the hunters have, play defensively at first. Mesmerize will be most useful here, and Plotting as well. Strength will be your basic combat card as it cancels so many of the hunter's attacks, and even discards items if the battle is happening at night. Use Fangs and Claws more judiciously, especially until you know which items the hunters hold. Don't be afraid to cut your losses as well. 15 health might seem like a lot at first, but Dracula's options are reduced considerably as the damage mounts. Escaping is a perfectly viable and sometimes necessary play. Managing the encounter cards will also play a key role in your victory. Essentially, you can view each card as a single-use resource. and so you must use them well. Let's take a look at them now. There are 3 aspects to the encounter cards. First, you have the ambush effect, which you trigger on an unwary hunter, the trap effect, which triggers when hunters search the space, and the matured effect, which happens when the card slides off the trail and the effect activates that way. In general, you're not going to want to ambush much. It's much better to let the hunters waste an action searching that space and running into the traps that you have laid. The vampires are going to be generally the cards you want to mature, although the effect for a card like Hoax can also be very beneficial. Because the vampires clear the hideouts located on the 4th, 5th, and 6th places on the trail, you will generally want to space these guys apart so that this effect doesn't remove a vampire encounter card on you. Vampires also have the beneficial side effect of shortening your trail, making you harder to find. Some other encounters help in hindering hunter movement or delaying them. These are best played in large cities that happen to have a bunch of rail links, like Paris, for example. And there are other encounters that are best saved for when the hunters are close. Cards like bats can be thrown down in a hunter's path to throw them off the chase, and others like Zagani bodyguards, Zagani mob, or rats can discourage the hunters from pursuing combat with you by giving them damage ahead of the battle, or by causing them to discard items. Unnatural Fog is your best and most flexible encounter card overall. It can be used to great effect in many different ways, like locking down a hunter for a while, giving you a safe space to hide out, or as a natural obstacle for the hunters to have to work around. This is especially true if used in a port, or if it matures, which gives you 2 fog tokens. For a much more detailed breakdown on the encounter cards, check out a video on the Quincy Morris channel, which I will link to in the comments section below. There are also a lot of in-depth videos about Fury of Dracula to be found there, including recommended hunter play as well. A quick word here on movement by sea. While a lot of people think moving by sea is an amazing way to throw the hunters off your trail, it does cause you damage and allows the hunters to stock up on health, items, and tickets, as they are not being hurt by your nasty encounters or vampires. Experienced hunters should still be able to figure out where you might be, so use it sparingly as a way to pop up in a surprising location now and then. It's all part of being unpredictable. And finally, the power cards. The power cards are important and sometimes necessary tools to winning a game with Dracula. They give you some great abilities, although remember that when you play these cards you generally aren't moving, which can hurt your cause long term. And some of them, like Dark Call, cause some damage to you. Some of them will be quite obvious in their use, like Feed or Dark Call. Dark Call is especially great early on in the game if you don't have the encounter card you want or need, such as a vampire. Feed will be necessary to help you recover some health, but at the cost of movement. You're going to want to use it when you've got a bit of space between you and the hunters. Wolf Form is a very powerful ability that allows Dracula to move up to 2 roads away, even passing through a hunter in doing so. This comes at the cost of a single damage. If you really want to be deceptive, you can combine this card with Hide, sowing confusion among your pursuers who can't be sure you are still in the same space or whether you broke out to the other side of their containment line. This card is likely to be used when the hunters are very close, but haven't yet entered your space. But you may want to use it when you just want to put additional space between you and the hunters. The hunters might think they had you panicked and cornered, as this card is typically used as a last-minute escape. Remember, be unpredictable. Hide is another example of a card that can throw hunters off the trail. When hunters are mathing things out, they assume that Dracula is moving 1 space per turn. This card can mess with that calculation, and works especially well with the Wolf Form power card and Misdirect. Speaking of which, Misdirect allows you to sculpt the trail a little bit, perhaps removing a piece of it before the hunters stumble across it, or by removing the location card, allowing Dracula to double back through that city again. This is another card that throws off the hunter's math. This can be especially effective if you use it to clear a sea location, as doubling back by sea can be especially confusing and it doesn't cost you an encounter card. Finally, I will give you a basic trajectory of how many games will go. The first week is about keeping you and your trail hidden for as long as possible, especially if you are able to play a vampire onto your trail early, which you hope to mature for the influence points. The second and third week are more about survival. The hunters will have items to use against you, so combat will be more costly. The hunters will generally have more mobility as well. They will be closing in on you and working hard to clear your trail before it matures. You will need to be very resourceful with your encounter and power cards. Be clever and careful. In the last week, the hunters will be under a tremendous amount of pressure. You will likely be hurt, but so will they. You might consider a few different options here, like retreating to Castle Dracula to recover some health, fleeing to sea where you can get some distance ahead of the hunters, or even turn on a weak hunter that has been following too close. And that is a basic summary of how you will want to play Dracula. Most times you will want to be stealthy, but be aggressive when it is to your advantage. You have the bandwidth to switch gameplay styles, often multiple times during a game. Be unpredictable. We hope this strategy guide gave you some great ideas on how to play the Lord of Darkness better. If you benefited from this video and if you enjoyed it, please do us a favor and like the video below. This is Legendary Tactics.